Good afternoon, everyone. We have begun our recording, and so just wanted to thank everyone for participating and being on the call today. Greatly appreciate your time. I think we have a couple things we want to make sure we just kind of accomplish today. I sent out previously the spreadsheet that captured the student participation throughout Q4. And so I'll talk about that briefly because I did receive a couple questions on that piece and some wonderings. Then we'll look at our 3-option document for parents, the one-pager that we're drafting. I did receive a little bit of feedback, so I made those updates. So just want to share the newest version. And then anxious to hear if anybody has any other thoughts about grades and attendance and how we might improve that communication in the ICP. Beth has added for us in our OneDrive a listing of our community partners, so we can certainly just all continue to add to that piece. I don't know that we need to spend a lot of time on that subject other than just everyone really being aware that we have that document there and continue to add. And then Stephanie's added a piece about this student registration draft that Christy shared. So that'll be our highlights for today. We'll do our very best to stick to the hour and a half. If you have questions, of course, as always, raise your hand, throw things in the chat as you need to. Stephanie, if you can help monitor the chat when I'm sharing my screen, because I'm not able to see it always during those times. So with that said, all right, thanks. We'll go ahead and start by sharing the participation numbers for distance learning. So these numbers reflect the students that actually have a unique login during the Q4 for assignments. As we said last week, it was a little complicated because teachers could use a variety of platforms. And so trying to capture all that information into one, this is what we have and is as clean as we can possibly get it, again, without having just one common learning management system. And then Dr. Barrios was gracious to add the counts as of April 8th. That was kind of a peak point for us with checking out devices. And so you can see how many devices each school checked out as well during that time. So one of the things this information does not capture is the paper-based packets that were given out. So I can speak to Alturas Elementary because it's one of the schools in my region that I served. And I know that they did have a high count of paper-based, so that's probably why you're seeing a lower number there of 73%. Couple questions we got back after I sent this out were around our center schools and some of our alternative sites. Mm-hmm. And we certainly know that's an area, where we have some work to do, or the schools did a different approach. Our center school principals were very active in helping us get some paper-based lessons out to their students. And as we look to move forward, we are looking to try to integrate some of their unique learning features and the systems of the curriculum they use into Schoology. So just wanted to share those numbers. Any questions with that before?
Well, and I know in our group, Michelle, Brandy Gogol is an ESE self-contained teacher at Channel Lakes Elementary, and she was very instrumental in their use of unique learning. And so she's very interested in helping with that platform. She trained another school even on it. And so she has a plethora of knowledge with that platform. And I know she really wants to get involved with that piece. So she could probably be a big asset to our center schools and self-contained classrooms.
Perfect. I wrote that down. We also were looking this week to make some connections to some teachers in Manatee County that have had experience using unique learning within the Schoology platform, just to kind of, we can learn from some of their growing pains. It'll just help us move along even faster. So thanks, Brandy. All right. Any other questions you see in the chat, Stephanie, or anything about this?
Not yet.
Okay. So and in some areas, just to kind of highlight the positive, we had a lot of schools that really worked actively to get as many students as possible engaged. And so I think that gives us, while of course we would love to be in a normal school setting like we experienced before COVID, I think it does provide a basis to give us a little bit of hope and like I said, areas for improvement and reflection as well. So with that said, I'll go ahead and switch over to the side-by-side document. Can you see that, Stephanie? Did it come through?
I just have the Excel still.
Okay.
So you might need to stop sharing.
And share again.
Yeah.
All right. How about now? Coming?
Yep.
Okay,
yep,
great. Thank you. So in trying to capture some summary pieces of the things we discussed last week and thinking ahead about how we are going to need to clearly communicate our options to families and staff as well, thinking about this document. And of course, our objective is really just to get the meat and potatoes, if you will, on the document. And our PR department is fantastic in making things look wonderful. So if we can just get the contents accurate, and I know Rachel and Jason and the team over there will make it look great. So really just wanting to highlight some of the pieces, and some of the work that we'll need to update is being done in our other groups. So like where you see wearing face coverings required or optional, we're just really kind of waiting on them to finalize the piece. I know they had their meeting this morning, and even as we constantly get updates with CDC recommendations, we'll have those pieces up to date as well, and then provide a link to the information where they'll have their safety protocol, FAQ, or whatever we post on the website. So then this is kind of the broad overview, and then parents will be able to link to the various websites to dig a little deeper. And then our parents that need help with that and may not have internet, then our schools will have the information at their fingertips to assist on the phone and making those calls.
I really, and this was just released last night, but our neighboring county, Osceola, released their plan, and I liked the way they laid it out. It was very easy to read, but it still had details that were important and pertinent. And so we might want to take a look at Osceola because it looks very similar to what we've been talking about in our groups. And I do want to assert here too that, as the numbers keep climbing, our PEA focus group spent a lot of time talking about this on Monday in our group, and we're in unanimity that as numbers keep climbing, the face-to-face option is looking where it's just not going to be feasible, I don't think. And we as a group were very concerned, and we did not feel that we really needed to be putting our resources into the face-to-face and putting resources into making this distance learning work. I just don't know how we're going to do face-to-face because just a personal thing right now, like my son's daycare closed, and we got word Sunday night because they didn't know until over the weekend. And so I think the constant opening and closing of schools as we get positive COVID cases is going to be more disruptive than just going to distance learning until these numbers start to decline more on a steady basis.
Yeah, I definitely hear you and understand. I think we still have to move forward with at least the plan based on what we've heard from DOE and the governor. So, definitely concerning. I know Superintendent Byrd has been in close contact this week with the Department of Health, and as many of you may have already heard, and we're releasing some additional information working with families. The previously required face-to-face summer school that the governor's office put out, we also were given the flexibility to push that virtual just this week due to our climbing numbers. So I think we just continue to plan as best we can and know that this is going to be challenging and times where we all just have to be a little bit flexible. So with that said, I wanted to just touch on a few pieces here and see what the group thought. And really, if you're in agreement, if we could put in the chat that you agree, and that way we can kind of quickly build consensus through the chat, and then Stephanie can help me monitor that. I wanted to bring up the,
before we move on, Michelle, Tasha had a question about, can you add extended transition services?
I don't know if you can see it. I typed it in there.
Oh, so okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I actually got my phone a little closer, so I'm monitoring some of that there too. So yes, okay. Thank you, Ms. Littles. I added that. I'll get with Dr. Steinke to make sure, how we want to align that. We were kind of capturing some of that all in one line, just to actually just to save some real estate to try to keep this to one page for families. But I made a note, and I'll take care of that with her. But wanted to bring up, I know we had a lot of creative naming and suggestions around that, but one thing I did learn this week in working with information services and kind of talking to Darren Williams, the principal of Polk Virtual School, is this whole concept of the word e-school. And so we already have a couple of nomenclature type things that work around full-time Polk Virtual students where we call it e-school. And so if the concept is I'm a Bartow Middle School traditional student or I'm a Bartow Middle School e-school student, there are some ways that we can kind of capture that within our platforms and focus where we do our master scheduling and attendance and things already. And so kind of wanted to see from the group how we felt about e-school. And so if we're feeling like that's okay, or, put it in your agreement, that was just something I wanted to put out there. And I know that one of the questions that came up was around paper-based packets versus distance learning through e-school. In all honesty, I think we need to try as much as we can to go towards the whole e-school concept because of the robust platforms that we have to support digital learning. Of course, nothing replaces that face-to-face interaction with the teacher, but we really will be providing our students with paper packets as an absolute last resort, because they need to have as many opportunities as they can to engage in instruction in a rich manner. And we can kind of get there more efficiently and more effectively through the whole e-school concept. So just wanted to get everybody's thoughts about e-school.
So far in the chat, everybody seems okay with e-school, and Christy has her hand up.
Okay, go ahead. Can you?
So just unmute yourself if you guys want to pop in and jump in. So go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm jumping in. I jumped in 5 minutes late. The one notice I had on the traditional on-campus, over on the second column, you say that in case schools close, everyone will go to this model. I feel like maybe some qualifications in the first column to say this model will be in place as long as certain things happen, because parents that elect this model because they don't feel like they have the other option, they may not read the second column. So if we could put something in this first column that says this will be in place and give the specific criteria, because then they know you're jumping in. You know what I mean? I just felt like that should be there in the first column too.
So something like for CDC guidelines.
Well, and we talked a lot in our focus group Monday about, the other counties are saying things like high, medium, low, having to have some sort of quantified data and quantified number. And so once we get that, you could put that there. And and you might say also this program will be in place for each school and the county as a whole until this happens, because parents also need to realize that a specific classroom or school might get closed down where the rest of the schools don't.
Yep, great feedback. Thank you. I made a note there, so we can definitely wordsmith that later, but I get what you're saying, so thank you.
The wordsmithing once the wordsmith is agreed, then it agrees everywhere like you said, the ICP stuff. But that was, I feel like it needs to be there because it's not a guarantee that we'll have it even for anybody, but we're offering it unless it's not. And then it also says, unless it's not safe, we're not offering it. That kind of, we're not listing out. We're saying we'll offer it as long as it's safe.
Yeah, I saw Hillsborough had like a red, yellow, green to follow their model. So okay, yep, that makes sense.
And we saw that from Clay County, but Clay County's, and I haven't seen Hillsborough's version of that, but we were concerned with Clay County's because it didn't have any quantifiers. So like it didn't tell you what the thresholds were for high, medium, and low susceptibility and case wise. So I think we're going to need help with that from Dr. Jackson's team at the Department of Health.
Stephanie, it also didn't say anything about whether it was district as a whole or by school.
Yeah.
I was thinking later that almost seems to be a by school decision. And so that would also be an issue with that, the way they had it laid out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I did have a question about the second and third choice.
Okay.
And maybe I'm just not seeing it, but it said school meal program, not checked.
Yeah.
Is there going to be a distance drop-off type thing like we have now? Is there some option? Because that literally may make a difference in parents' minds.
Yep. And we talked about that in a meeting we had earlier in the week. And right now, we do not have additional USDA waivers for the waiver that's in place that's allowing us to continue feeding and to necessarily not have the children in the car. And the logistics of staff, even if we're open brick and mortar and let's say a school nutrition team is, fully prepping, we just don't know the numbers yet. And so we'll update that if something changes. And we very well recognize that, for some of our families that have some of the biggest barriers, that could be a decision maker for them and force them into, one particular path. So, yes, we put that on there because we feel we need to be transparent with families. But at this point in time, it's looking like, unless something changes, that's the route that we'll have to go.
I think a second line, and I apologize, my computer was locked up in the friend's condo that's letting me borrow his condo where it's not full of 13 teenage girls. So I didn't look at it because it wouldn't come up on my phone until like 15 minutes. I was reading it, that's why I was late. So I think a different line, like an off-site meal pickup, would be appropriate if we do have one, because we don't want them to think they have to come to school to get meals or they'd be at a certain time, and they're kind of used to that. The question on this sheet that I had is that structured class time is not checked. Flexible class is checked under e-learning. And that seemed like a very big deal to teachers as part of our component.
Okay. So on the second column.
Correct. It's checked under flexible. And I thought we had agreed, or we had said desirable was to have your first period, whether it's at home or at school, is this time, your reading block is this time or whatever. So that was my concern. And I didn't know if that meant to be that way or we'd found out guidance it wouldn't work.
No, I don't. I think we just probably need to, and maybe it can come out in the FAQs. So if your structured class time, the first period, second period model, if you will, but you might have flexibility of when you could complete certain tasks. So I think it's just a matter of capturing both of those.
Well, I think it needs to be, and if that's the case, but they are still expected to report at certain times. I think it needs to be checked because right now we meet certain times, but we may give them projects or homework that they do during class or on their own time and stuff. So I feel like that really needs to be in structured class time if we have that expectation, or parents are going to say, well, I didn't realize that later on. I know the FAQs help, but let's be honest, people don't read it. They're going to look at this.
I hear you. Okay, I just made the correction. Thank you.
And Danny has her hand up. So Danny, you can unmute yourself.
I was just going to say that the structured class time would be probably very difficult for some of our families at the Title I schools that do select or end up having to do this module or this option, just because many of the kids are staying with daycares or with babysitters. And so that would just be very difficult. And we had a huge issue with this, with the learning, since we closed in March. To have that expectation might be too much.
So Beth is saying in the chat, maybe check both.
What a good idea.
With maybe some qualifiers there.
So I'm going to check. I'm checking it with an asterisk, and then maybe that's something that, and I'm making a note to kind of really look at that language, because I think it would depend on what they're doing, and it may also have a layer of impact through when we get to bargaining working conditions. It could be that a particular teacher might have more flexibility with his or her day to be more aligned with that e-school concept. But yeah, so I think we're just going to have to flesh that one out some more.
Yeah, and I agree with Christine in the chat. One of the main complaints we heard from the fourth quarter in regard to just the structure was that there wasn't any structure. and I get, we were being flexible, and it was an emergency learning situation. We were more crisis management. But if this is going to be a viable option moving forward, there's got to be some structure in place. And we have to be very upfront with that, I think, with parents as we're looking at fleshing out this option, because we also can't have teachers and support staff be expected to work 12, 14-hour days like they were doing in the fourth quarter, because there wasn't any structure. And I think that's going to be a very key component here, because we also have to be able to account for seat time for this to be able to get approved. We have to have some mechanism in there to account for that.
And I kind of had a thought around the concept of, yes, we have to account for the seat time, but perhaps if the class time was a little flexible, then the teacher could set up potential, couple of days a week, evening office hours, but then would know that they're still working their 7.75 day, but flex the hours within the day. And so I see another question from Lois in the chat about how would we differentiate between Colt Virtual School and eSchool. That it goes by the 4 digits unique school number, and it would kind of be done in focus. But just for the nomenclature piece, eSchool would kind of be our Polk County term, if you will, that this is a full-time e-learning student, and then the unique school number and their schedule and focus would help us differentiate. So and then there's some mechanisms that even if you're at the brick and mortar of that school, but then you're also in the e-school, we could do some cohort scheduling and things of that nature. But by calling it one and of the same, I think it lets us all kind of clearly communicate the terms. I see Beth made another comment about even giving some flexibility in case there's technology issues. Yes, that's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't think anybody's saying that if they don't log in, there's no excuse. But we do need to be mindful of a structure. And that needs to be, we need to be very transparent and upfront with that. When parents are looking at these options, and when teachers are looking at these options, and other support staff that maybe have access to this, because whereas I understand most people work during the day and they're going to be troubleshooting some of this at night, we can't expect teachers to deliver instruction within their duty day and then be available for 5 hours or 4 hours outside of their duty day when it's their family time. And so I think we really need to work on the structure part and the accountability piece.
Yep. Sounds good.
So tying into that, we say that you'll have to go a set time, and we keep talking about 7 to 2, 8 to 3, 9 to 4. We know all the studies that say high schoolers don't do well early in the morning in that. We could also offer an afternoon option. And some teachers may prefer, we could offer like a second shift, if you will, that started at noon and went to 7 or something like that, where they did. And Stephanie and I think had talked about maybe your planning period one day a week being an evening time that parents could get to. So you don't have an hour and a half in the middle of the day where you plan. You have that time in the evening. But otherwise, there's got to be a limit to when we check email and when we are able to be texted and things like that, or it doesn't turn into the same job, and the kids won't know, they won't realize they have to check in and see us, because if they're not going to check in and see us, they might as well do virtual. And I realize not everybody can do Polk virtual, but they're going to have to do a lot of things Polk virtual requires to do this successfully too.
So we've got, I think Beth has her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add real quickly, if you don't mind, one of the links that Amy Hardy sent out last week had, I think it was a California school. I don't know. You know how it is. You read so many things, you really don't know what you remember. They talked about check-in and they separated it with K-5 and then middle school and high school. I thought it was interesting that they said students need to complete the check-in by 11:59 p.m. or be counted absent for the day. I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know if that, is pertinent to what we're saying, and if that is some of the language we could use moving forward down the road to make it more specific, that you have to check in within, this either window, or we give you all day. I think teachers will go, what? If you're waiting till 11:59 to check in for that day, and we'll either have, it will rub teachers the wrong way, I think, a little bit. But I thought it was interesting that we could think about having specific language for what their check-in time is and divide it by K-5, middle school and high school. And in my world, since we have art and music, once a week in elementary, a different way that looks in addition to that. So just wanted to toss that out there as one of our resources to look at. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Beth. And I also saw that I think in some ways we're going to have to challenge one another to think a little differently as well, because that is one of the pieces when we talk about attendance and looking at some other districts, even within Florida. And I found a resource from Texas that was pretty good as well. This whole concept of asynchronous attendance taking. So if I log in and I do my work and my teacher can see I did my work, that's technically me being marked present for that day. And so it's just, it's definitely a different dynamic than what we're used to, but I think we're going to have to be flexible in that regards, but also honor the time of our teachers, that it's not, that our teachers, cannot be accessible 24/7 either, that there will be boundaries.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I really liked in reading over Osceola's plan this morning was that in their, and I don't know if they called it e-learning or distance learning, but in their distance learning option, they had said, you'll have access to materials, but teachers will only be available during regular school hours, right? And so, and we can expound on that and maybe look at staggered scheduling with some of our positions, or in a volunteer basis, to if somebody wants to work their 7.75, not 8 to 3:30 or 8 to 3:45 or whatever, to help with families in the afternoon and in the evenings. But I think we need to be very clear with the structure.
Just to hit a couple other notes on this particular page that I think will also help us and maybe expedite some of our discussions around grading policies, report cards, and attendance. So that is a piece too in the new ICP that we have to formulate, that basically requires all of those components to follow district policy. And so I think that kind of eliminates the emergency status of a grade not falling below quarter 3 So we'll definitely make sure that gets communicated more clearly. And when there's a presentation about all this information, that'll definitely be there as well. And then with school athletics and extracurriculars, we will have to be careful that, and we'll have to monitor this through an enrollment piece on our side, that if a student is, zoned for that school or is actually fully applied to that school and been approved through a COE, that's their school, that they participate in athletics and extracurriculars, that there's not any abuse of transfers through the e-school process during this time. So just wanted to kind of bring that up to the group as well. And then the last two lines, we want to make sure that we share with parents that regardless of the option, we need our family and school partnerships, but that if you're choosing option, the eSchool option or Polk Virtual, that there's a little bit different understanding as the role that a parent serves. So if anybody has, I was stuck on that particular row for a little while, and the best dialogue or the best verbiage I came up with was parent serves as a learning coach. The teacher's the teacher, but the parent's going to have to help monitor that. And there's some more on that in the FAQ about the parent's role in monitoring, but definitely open to suggestions on that piece as well.
Well, and I see Christy's hand up, and I'm also looking at the chat too. And so I'll get to Lois's question in a second, because I think maybe something Christy said in the chat might help with that row.
Okay.
Because, in the fourth quarter, a lot of teachers, put content out, but monitored. There wasn't necessarily a teaching aspect if people weren't doing live or recorded lessons, which they weren't required to do. And so I think maybe putting it out, that the teacher is teaching and parents are monitoring and serving as a coach, in their household. And so parent serves as a learning coach to monitor student progress through curriculum and content, maybe.
I think the learning coach is an excellent phrasing for that. And I guess my point, and it goes back to the schedule, is that am I there as a resource, which could be any time, or am I there to teach the class? So if I'm teaching Algebra 1 and I'm trying to teach, I theoretically, I could put a video up for them to watch at any time. But, if I'm teaching, I thought the point of the e-learning was that we would actually engage the students and attempt to teach them as normally as possible with the distance learning part. And I can't do that if everybody signs in at a different time, and if they sign into every class at a different time. So that's my concern about the flexibility, is knowing what I am expected to do. Does it mesh with what the students are expected to do?
I get that. And I guess my question would be that just how to capture that accurately, because let's say you do teach a lesson and the time period coincides with third period, but you record that lesson, and we have a student that may be in a situation like Danny was describing, that they're with a babysitter, but they listen to that lesson later and they email you a couple of questions, and then the next day when it's the teacher's actual work time, they answer those questions, and then the learning continues on. So while, it would be more ideal for a child to be live in that class, I think we're going to have to at times be flexible based on some different situations just like that. So I think that was my struggle in thinking through some of those different scenarios. And how do you say, is it structured class time or is it a flexible class time? And if we have the capability of recording when the teacher does the lesson through an e-school, what would inhibit a student from tuning in later?
My only worry with that, I thought our concern from the beginning about e-school was being allowed counted time, and then we can only do so if showed they had done it. And that would be that's where the accountability comes in, to make sure that we are that they're counting, when we tie that attendance to that type of thing. And I don't understand all the technology. I don't know how to record myself doing anything, but is there a way, if they watch it later, that we can prove they watched it later and count them for attendance, or is that not counted by the state because it's not for 90 minutes or whatever?
Yeah, good question. I'll
So-
check into that a little bit more.
So Lois has her hand up, and then Amy. And so Lois, do you want to also ask the question that you had in the chat too?
Yes, but let me start with another question pertaining to what was just discussed. First question has to do with Polk Virtual School. It was my understanding that there are times in Polk Virtual School when students are expected to attend class sessions, either virtually or sometimes in the past in person. So I wonder if maybe checking that there's some structured class time in Polk Virtual, because unless I misunderstood, I didn't understand that it was all self-paced. I thought there were actual class meetings. Is that not true?
I'll have to go back and double check, but I think the majority of it is self-paced.
I believe
they have parameters. They have like benchmark parameters, like you should be finished with, let's just say units 1, 2, and 3 by this date, and you should be finished. So there are benchmarks in time, but a little more flexible.
I think I just recently read, when I read the overview of Polk Virtual School, I thought I read weekly class sessions with the teacher, but I might be maybe I misunderstood that. The second issue I wanted to bring up is that on college campuses, when they went to distance learning, professors held lectures. My son would have to attend synchronous lesson or lectures, but they would also videotape those lectures so that they were available later on to review, but they were still expected to check in that they actually attended in person. So I wonder if that might be the way to run e-learning as an option.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I can't raise my hand. I can't find the button to raise my hand, so I just have to kind of chime in. But I can't say this with 100% certainty for Polk Virtual School, but I know for a fact that Florida Virtual School requires it for all their courses, and I'm 99% sure Polk Virtual does the same thing, where there's these things called discussion-based assessments, where you have to call in to an instructor over the phone, and you have to talk to them about the current chapter or lesson you're on, and they'll ask you a few questions just to make sure like that you're retaining the information and you're not just you're able to answer questions impromptu.
Thank you, Nicholas. That was my understanding of the weekly session many times, and it's been a couple of years, but my husband taught for Polk Virtual for a couple of additional classes, and that was kind of how that piece ran. So I'll double check into it, but thanks, Nicholas and Lois, for bringing that up.
Thank you.
So I had one other question that I put in the chat. Do you want me to bring that up now, Stephanie?
Sure, Lois, and then we'll go to Amy.
Okay, so from my point of view, there is so much to be decided and so much to be scheduled and planned and implemented. The date of August 10th is scaring me. So I just wanted to bring that up because I have heard that mentioned by many teachers and parents. Is it realistic to think that everything will be in place by August 10th? And I hope so.
Are you talking, Michelle?
No, but I felt like there was an expectation that I should be talking, but however, I'm not sure I have the answer for that. No, I hear you, Lois. There's an incredible amount still yet to be done. But I think, those decisions are, we can obviously share our thoughts from our task force, but they're a little bit beyond our scope and our reach. And quite honestly, at this point in time, and we know things change, this has kind of changed recently with our summer learning programs, but at this point in time, that is still our directive from DOE. Who it was? Amy next.
Yeah, Amy's up.
Okay, so let me see. Okay, so I definitely think that the teacher boundaries of office hours, I think that it's very important. Even as a principal, I had to physically turn my cell phone off at 10 p.m. every night, or there was no like sleeping. So I do think that's important, but I do think Michelle is on the right vein of having maybe recorded lessons, but then the set, like Christy's saying, the set time. That way, you know, there's some of our kids that could produce on a recorded session, do the assignments, turn them in. Let's say if Miss McCullough was their teacher, turn it into Miss McCullough, and then Miss McCullough knows, okay, they're with me. But then if they're struggling, the teacher would be able to say, okay, you really need to tune in at 8 a.m. because that's when I'm teaching live and I can really answer your questions, and highly encourage that. Because visiting, because I handed out the lunches during our like April, May, and there were certain neighborhoods that we actually had to go door to door to make sure that the kids were getting their food. And to actually see the homes, you know, most of your parents are working, and it is the parent prerogative, the fact that it's okay. They feel that their age of their kids can be home with their children. Because I looked that up with Florida state law. And so they feel that their kids can handle it, but the structured, you know, actually making it mandatory for the kid to come in that time, just don't know how it's going to work. But if they're struggling, we definitely need to put them in those live sessions, but they might be okay with the recorded. And I'm definitely one of those that are kind of anti-paper based, because the teacher is so important and the paper base is completely void of teaching. And even though my best teachers would like take the paper and write notes all the way around it, and then we'd make copies of those, the kids still were just floundering. And of course you add the fact that they don't have the internet, because they already are doing paper based. So then their communication gap is so much more of a divide. So I think Michelle's on the right vein. Maybe Tedra's committee will add it when they sort out like the teachers' hours to be definitely fair to them, because I see it. Our teachers were absolutely exhausted with the times that they were going. But I do think there is credence with some flexibility.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great point, Amy. We do want to be flexible with our families, but we also need to make sure and ensure that our teachers and our staff understand that if they've already worked their day, if the student has opted to do something more flexible where they are maybe watching a recorded lesson, that they may not get they're not going to get their question answered until the next day. And if they do need help, like you were saying, that we need to strongly encourage them to tune into the live lessons or work with the teacher during the regular hours. Because I know teachers just in general, you know, our hearts are where we're going to help them, and we a lot of times will put our personal health and well-being, you know, on the back burner. But that's also how people burn out and leave, because they just can't take it anymore. So we need to be very mindful of helping set those boundaries.
Also see in the chat, Danny's mentioned about, you know, how some of our parents will have a difficult time with this. Some of the high school students, you know, may be able to monitor themselves. It can be overwhelming for some of our non-English speaking families. Definitely understand that. I think we also need to keep in mind too that, you know, everybody's health and safety is of the utmost importance. And this hopefully is not, you know, a long-term commitment. The e-school can be by quarter. And even if someone, you know, I know in my heart that if the student at Fort Meade Middle Senior had selected e-school and they were just really, really struggling, but it wasn't quite the fourth quarter, Amy's going to do everything in her power to help that student and get them this support and help that they need. And I think, our schools will. We have to have some sort of line in the sand so that we can do grades and make sure everything's staying consistent. But, if our students really don't have the means at home to support kind of the e-school concept, and hopefully then that as soon as we possibly can with the proper health and safety, we get them in school, because honestly, those are our kids that need us the most. That's one of the things I struggle with, personally with all this, is that our kids that, have been out of school for so long, and they need to come back, and they need to have that stability and that interaction with their peers and their teachers. That's going to be challenging. And then I see Heather also put how she recorded lessons for her students throughout the fourth quarter. And we know a lot of our teachers did that. And so that'll definitely, help our students to see more of that.
I do want to chime in. My daughter, she took Hope PE. She's taking it right now. And so, and I know that's an elective, but she does not have to check in, and she's doing it through Polk Virtual. She does not have to check in on a regular basis. So it's a self-pace. The teacher will email me as the parent and my daughter on her pace to make sure she's getting done by a certain time. But everything is kind of self-directed. Now, it may be different with Core, but she has not had to do anything weekly or join a class or anything like that up to date, and she's already on semester 2. So just wanted to also add that as a tidbit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Lois put in the chat that she pulled off of Polk Virtual, their website, that they do have classrooms in their Lakeland office where students attend monthly face-to-face instruction with certified high qualified teachers.
And I think they're actually, they're going to have to look at other options for that piece as well. And that I'm going to check with Darren. I think that's primarily for the elementary people in Polk Virtual, but I'll double check. And I do know that they have some social groups as well, but I don't know that, that'll be contingent on CDC guidelines as well, if we're able to do that even with our virtual students. So I think, did anyone else have anything on this particular document? I've made notes on it and highlighted pieces to work on.
So I have 3 people in the participants that have their hands up, but I don't know if Amy and Lois still have their hands up from before. But I know Christy, I just saw hers pop up. Okay. So go ahead, Christy.
Okay, so I really like what Amy said. And to me, if you can successfully do the job, then you understand the job. So I like the idea of recording the instruction and then having the students complete. And then the next day, if they can't complete, or they get a certain percent or something like that, they need to come to us, and so that they need to come to us during their specific time. But you're right. We have kids that can do it without a lot of help from us, and others need more help. So I think if we could somehow make it okay with the state that them watching the recorded and completing the assignment. And by the way, there is a program out there that will not let you fast forward the video and will let you embed questions in the video to be answered. So the kid can't put it on play and walk away. They have to, it'll stop at the questions. There are things like that. So if we could do that, then, and the state would accept that as seat time, I'm okay with that. My worry is that there won't be a lot of structure, but my worry is that they will need help, and they will think help can happen anytime. And so, and I want to be sure what I'm expected to do as a teacher. If I'm expected to deliver this type of meeting with my 28 kids at once, I can't do that with all 168 of them at the same time. So I need specific time. So it goes back to teacher expectations. But I do agree, Amy, that if the kid can complete the objective for that day, whether it's dividing, 3 numbers or something, then that should count. I just want to make sure the state will count it as seat time so we can count it for progress.
Okay. Yep. Makes sense.
I mean, it's almost it's almost like we're gonna for our e-learning teachers that are in this option, they're gonna have to follow like a master schedule like they would if they were in school, so that they have a designated lunch and planning and classes, and so that people can drop in and watch the live, you know, or come in and ask questions, you know, if that's part of the lesson that day, so that they're not just floundering.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, we did have a just kind of resource. I can't remember if it was I think it was in the teacher support document of the emergency ICP, where we just had a recommended frame for building out your schedule. I think we're going to have to work on something like that, and then make sure it's all clearly communicated with the administration, the teachers, everybody's, you know, on the same page. And then communicating that with parents, like, here's the teacher's hours for this particular subject, or this is the days of the week I'm going to do live lessons, kind of going back to like what Lois said. If, you know, these days are live lessons and these days, you know, I might do some small group targeted help. This is how it's going to be structured. One thing I think I forgot to mention is about pre-K. And I know we've been talking a lot about elementary, middle, and high, but I was on a call earlier this morning, and I'm going to have to come back to this part about pre-K just for us as a district. And I have an asterisk there because currently VPK and Head Start, they have some minimum hour requirements that are face-to-face that they've not been given flexibility on yet. So I just wanted to bring that up to the task force that we may have to say that this e-school option really is just for kindergarten through 12th grade. For those of you that are not as familiar with preschool programs, VPK actually stands for voluntary preschool or pre-kindergarten. So we're not quite sure how the state's going to view that word voluntary and where we may be given flexibility or we may not. So just wanted to mention that for the good of the group in case you see a change under this e-school concept with the pre-K. So just wanted to bring that up before I switch screens.
I like Jason's suggestion, and he did have his hand up in the chat. So Jason, do you want to unmute and expound on that?
Sure. Right now, we currently have the web page we're using for reopening. We tried to create the options that are available and the ones that we're working on. Right now, it's listed as option 3. Technically, it's your option 2. It just says coming soon. But if you keep the words very, very simple, 1 or 2 words, it'll help when people are trying to refer to it. If you just say campus learning, because it'll be anything but traditional, that at least we know is physically on a school site. And of course, you could have your e-school, which basically means you're attached or tethered to your school. And then there's Polk Virtual. It just if you just use 1 or 2 words, it'll probably be simple for people to refer to. That's it.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, I like that suggestion.
Campus learning.
Yeah, campus learning.
I like that. That's positive. That's good. Short,
Campus.
sweet, and to the point.
Well, and I think just like Jason said, you know, even if they're on campus, it's going to be anything but traditional. And so we don't want to also put that word traditional out there because it's not going to be their traditional school environment. It's going to be, it's going to look a lot different even if they are on campus.
Yep, good points. Can you see the FAQ screen now?
Yes.
Okay. Again, I will change this. A lot of the highlighting was just about e-learning. This is the piece where however, we put in this piece that teachers are only available during regular school hours, but we may need to revisit that wording as we flesh out working conditions more. So I'm just gonna highlight that to bring it to my attention to come back to it. The teacher will have some flexibility in Schoology to get some updates pushed out to students directly in some quick manners. we'll have to, some of this Schoology highlights are there, you know, again, for us to come back to because of the implementation of that program and where we are with, we're all still learning. So there was a reference to the community partners. So if we have that, we'll obviously update that on the website as well, where we currently have our roving bus Wi-Fi spots.
Michelle, could you change that regular school hours to the teacher's assigned office hours? Would that phrasing work? Because then it also doesn't mean it's every day too. And then it's teacher directed somewhat.
Yeah, I think that's good. But I think, you know, definitely revisit as we get further along too. I wanted just to share with the group, just for the sake of discussion, about how my students continue receiving support in an online environment. Dr. Steinke and the whole child support group is working on things for our students with disabilities, our English language learners, how other staff might be available, how they might support some small group targeted time with students that need additional help, whether it's through their IEP or their ESOL plan of study or whatever mechanism is in place to support students. So had a couple questions about that. And there, we do have the, you know, the capability to do a small group virtual lesson or a one-on-one lesson. And so those teachers that serve in a support facilitation role, or they might be an ESOL teacher, you know, they'll definitely need to be in on the scheduling piece as well, so that they can schedule their direct support time with students and not overlap, or be in conjunction with some of their general education teachers that they would normally work with throughout the school day.
Well, and I know when we were in our group, Brandy Gogol was describing how they used Zoom, and there's different ways you can work with Zoom, and like with waiting rooms. And so they would do like their lesson delivery, you know, with unique learning. And then if a student needed help, like one of the pairs would go into a waiting room, right? And the child would also go into that waiting room, and then they could, you know, work on whatever they needed to work on, and then come back into the main group. Kind of like that small group polling, just in a virtual app.
And we saw a similar demo of that from a teacher in Manatee that had already set up her small groups through Schoology. And so each kid just kind of had a quick shortcut button, if you will, that they hit, and then that put them right in their small group with their teacher or their para or whomever was helping them. So on the FAQ, some of it was just technology that I skipped over, as we'll rely heavily on Dr. Barrios and her team for all those technical pieces. And we'll, you know, have to have our hotline and support systems back up as well. But this parental monitoring piece was kind of where we came with that parent as a learning coach for the student. So if anybody has any feedback on this section, that would be appreciated.
Christy in the chat mentioned having an FAQ for teachers and staff.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and we can, you know, I know as working conditions are fleshed out, that's probably where our staff FAQ, a lot of their questions are going to come from. But something to put on the radar so that we can help develop that for them. And so I'm trying to remember one of our first conversations with the task force with Schoology. Did I remember correctly that Schoology will talk to Focus so that teachers can assign stuff through Schoology, but then it will put grades into Focus without them having to do double work?
It's a pass back. I know that the grade can pass back through Focus. I think this teacher still has to just verify, you know, do the same kind of thing, grade it or whatever. But
yeah,
if the assignment gets a 80 in Schoology, it pushes that 80 over to Focus without having to do the manual double entry.
Okay.
That's what I've been told.
Can you override it if for whatever reason you feel like that's not an appropriate grade?
I'm sure you can.
Higher or whatever, like higher, for instance, or something like that.
Yeah, I'm sure you can, because that's a functionality of Focus.
Okay.
So that would override that, but.
Michelle, one of the concerns I've heard from multiple teachers, including a very close friend, is they don't have internet at home. And so, and none of the programs that were available for students were available for teachers. So, their classrooms have internet. They're not necessarily health compromised, but they're willing to do this if there's a big demand for it, but they don't have the resources to do it. So would they be able to use their facility with no one in their room to do it?
Oh, like
that's
their classroom?
That's actually something that I had a conversation with Tedra about. She liked the idea. She had brought it up to me, and I know that was a big that was some questions we had in the spring. People wanted to, because they didn't have reliable internet or resources, even from a staff perspective. And so I think that is going to be an option, even with distance learning. If teachers need to utilize their classrooms, and honestly, I think that's going to help with boundaries. If we can open that up, if you physically go to work, even though you're not interacting, with your 180 kids, but if you physically go to work and then you physically leave, that does help, create boundaries. And then you don't have to have all of your resources and video stuff, cluttered up in your house too. And you have good, reliable internet at school.
The other concern was about technology, in the sense that they weren't sure what technology they would need to successfully do this, if it would be provided. And, lead money has always been July 1st. And if there was technology that would really assist, that would be allowed to be bought, if we even have lead money this year, but would be allowed to be bought. So as they're planning, they could maybe use their lead money to order, whether it be a microphone or whatever would help. Because a lot of them are like me. We don't know. We have no idea what technology is out there that would help. But could we possibly use some of our lead money maybe to take some of the burden off the school and make it a more successful experience for us?
I think that's, definitely something to consider, and we may could coordinate with Dr. Barrios and the school technology team, even to just provide a list of recommended, if you are going to go out and purchase a microphone, or if you are going to go out and purchase a headset, hey, here's what we typically buy for schools, or here's something of good quality. And that's something we could definitely talk to the tech team about, as long as it was in the parameters of the lead money rules.
Well, and I think with lead money, it's been pretty historical, where you can't buy that kind of stuff. You can't buy tablets, you can't buy a printer. And so we probably can't buy hardware like that. But we do have CARES Act money that can be used for just this type of thing to help us fill the gaps of the needs moving forward with the distance learning and other options.
Well, there's usually a dollar amount for anything electronic. I don't know if you can get anything good for under that dollar amount for that. And, some teachers do have the funds to purchase their own stuff. They just might feel better if there was list. Also, if there's a district bid and we could get it with our individual money for the district amount, that would be a nice resource too.
Okay, I'm making a note to check into that more. Some of the laptops that we're buying now, though, I think have many of those features embedded. I know I don't, and I see Dr. Barrios has her hands up, but I just use my district laptop and it's been pretty great for video, mic, all that types of things. So sometimes it may be a difference too in interpretation of what's the bells and whistles and what gets the job done. So go ahead, Tina.
Thanks. Primarily most of the laptops, and we've replaced a significant number for teachers in the last 4 to 5 years, all have video and audio built in, and it's actually pretty effective and pretty straightforward with some of the programs. Some folks will use, you'll see a lot of folks using their, their either, many people have earbuds or they have the microphones. A lot of people have the iPhones with the headsets that come with them that actually have fairly good sound. But we can certainly look at that. We do buy headsets for use at the schools as well. So we could certainly look. We can certainly look at that. I do think that we've just actually started implementing Schoology, and we are certainly looking at the grade pass back piece. We do know that Manatee has that working. There are some pieces that have to be in place in terms of setting up your grade book with categories in order for that to work. I do have a couple people specifically on our team looking at how that functions, that does the training for the grade book programmer. So we're actively looking at that piece. I also think that, as Michelle, a lot of people have mentioned that having some sort of standardization or framework with which for some commonality, so that parents and teachers and kids going in see something that's familiar. So one of the things that we've learned from Manatee, and just so you guys know, in Manatee, they had implemented Schoology, and we're really kind of rolling it out to middle and high schools, and had a handful of schools really using it. And then when COVID hit, they mandated that everybody jump into Schoology. Personally, my daughter's a first grade teacher and has a kindergartner. So I know how that worked with her. But I will tell you that they were able to jump in. From my daughter's personal experience, she was actually able to go in and manage that. So it's fairly intuitive, even though some of them had some training, and Michelle can tell you, we actually did a video chat so Michelle could see what an elementary Schoology might look like. And initially she's like, I'm never going to use this with my kids. And did the training and then got thrown into it and had to figure it out. And so we're really trying to learn from what Manatee did. But one of the things they emphasized was having a standardized kind of templated look and feel for K-5 and then either 6-8 or 6-12. They're working on that, and we're reaching out to them now to see how far along they are so we could learn from them. But I do feel like some sort of kind of standardization, giving enough flexibility, but having some kind of common look and feel will be very, very helpful and structured, because we are honestly throwing teachers into this world that to try to teach and deal with all of the different pieces and parts. And I'm sure all of you have seen or been on teams where all of a sudden the internet cuts out or something cuts out. You see it even on live on TV. So technology and technology support's going to be critical. And so I think part of the message is trying to make sure that people are comfortable and know that there's some support structures in place with enough flexibility, as you guys are mentioning. We were very successful in the quarter with the student parent helpline that we set up. We were flooded initially in the first few weeks, and then it really kind of tapered off, but that worked extremely well for us, and we'll put that back in place. And we certainly have the curriculum and the instructional technology folks working very closely to learn this platform, to be able to support this moving forward. So it's a positive step for us. I think it's going to help, but it is something that's going to take time, and we're fast tracking trying to get the platform up and running. So there will be some, obviously some hiccups, but we're certainly trying to learn as much as we can from districts who have implemented this a little bit more fully.
So Tina, Christy had a question in the chat for you. Can you use your computer if you are doing a PowerPoint and talking at the same time?
Yeah.
Or a smart board, like again, this is where I don't know. It's like if I'm using a PowerPoint, which I would normally have up there, but I would also be talking and explaining. Can you use your computer? Or do you need something else?
No, you can use your computer.
Okay.
Okay.
So just trying to circle back to kind of our objectives and what we wanted to accomplish today. Greatly appreciate all the feedback on the side-by-side. I'll work on getting that a little more clear and succinct. I think that particular document is really when, as we think forward to July 8th, when we have to share back out with the whole group. I don't know how others feel, but I really feel like for our group's work, that one pager really will kind of drive what we need to share in broad strokes with the broader group. And so I'm thinking if we can have that as tidy as possible, we may still have a couple of places with notes that add a link here or whatnot, as because some of that's contingent on the other groups finishing. And then the community partner piece, we can keep visiting. And then the other piece that we wanted to talk about were grades and attendance. I think if I've heard everybody kind of correctly, our concerns with attendance are, having some flexibility to perhaps capture when a student has a daily log on, but being stringent enough that we honor the state requirements so that we maintain our FTE. So we can definitely look at that. We still, other than what it was in section 5 of the updated ICP that we talked about last time, we have not received any additional information from the state in that regard. So we're just still proceeding with our drafts.
Mm-hmm.
And then as far as grades, really just sticking to our normal policies. I think the big pain point that everybody shared was that we don't want to communicate a lessened accountability to our students, that they need to be accountable for their work. They need to be accountable for their assignments that their teachers are giving them, and honor those due dates and things of that nature, just as if we were in the building. And so I think if we just kind of stick to our current policy language, that kind of solves those two problems in my mind. So if someone thinks differently, please let me know, or if you agree, you could type agree in the chat so that we just kind of get some feedback. But really sticking with those policies that would be aligned with our students that are in brick and mortar setting, as well as in an e-school setting, and getting those into the new ICP. So I'm seeing quite a few agrees coming in. So thank you all on that piece. What else are we missing that we wanted to talk about?
So, I'm assuming with the distance learning or e-learning, we all want to start talking the same lingo if we're going to call it e-learning. So e-learning,
e-school.
Thank you. E-school. Thank you. So with e-school option, making it also clear, if we're expected at the secondary level to still have 2 standards-based grades a week, communicating that to our families and to our teachers, so that they realize, again, what happened in the 4th quarter was crisis management, not school moving forward. And so if we're going to be going back to those board policies that were implemented, we want to be very upfront with that too.
Yep, totally agree. I think that's going to be a crucial communication piece as we roll out the plans to the public, and especially our family and especially our students, especially those of students that are returning, that this is not quarter 4, this is a new year, and this is how things are happening. Okay.
Christy has her hand up.
I'm sorry, I have my hand up a lot. Okay, so you're talking about a 1-page thing, which I think is excellent because it does give them that side by side. I thought it was an excellent with all the checks. Will this be linkable? So for instance, if they were to look at the flexible schedule, I still am hung up on the schedule, where if they were to check the box with the check between play. It would take them to a specific explanation of what is expected, or if they, you know what I mean? Like, could there be links based on maybe those check marks?
Yeah, I don't know that.
Information.
Yeah, I don't know that every single, I think it might be a little cumbersome if every single check mark was a link, but I think if up at the top for each option, whether it's the campus learning with all the new safety protocols, you click this link here and you learn more about what safety precautions are in place, or you click this link here to learn what exactly does this scheduling piece in eSchool mean.
Right.
I'm kind of envisioning an FAQ, if you will, for each of those columns
Okay.
that then kind of answer all those questions. And so maybe, Christy, to your point, I tried to align some of the topics in the eSchool FAQ that I started around some of those parameters. So maybe I could just go back and relook at that and make sure that we've kind of hit all those different areas with the questions.
You may
And
even
maybe a
head
keyword highlighted.
Maybe if you headed them the same way. So for instance, this one jumps out because so you had this one called scheduling, and you put the FAQs related to scheduling. You had one called, you know, school meals or meals, and you do the FAQs, and they're the same as those things on the left. Then they can go to find out specifics, and that specifics is what really, that's what these people are so worried about, the specific, and so a check mark is probably not going to be enough for some of them, teachers and students. So
I think that's good. Kind of align the FAQ with the rows.
Yes.
Okay, I got it.
So Roger, oh, go ahead, Christy. Sorry.
So then I'm going back to this. You know, we're talking about these recorded things. Would it be necessary for every third grade teacher in the county to record the third grade math lesson for the day? Or could we have people that record to be used so that that equalizes the technology level for everybody in the county, so that they get the same quality of recording and everything like that? I mean, do we have to we want to interact with our kids face to face and want to answer their questions, but do we have to actually visually, verbally teach every concept via video and so forth?
Well, I think that's a big question that kind of lends, you know, you'd have some teachers that would appreciate that, and you'd have some teachers that feel like that's taken away kind of their professionalism and their what they're doing, you know. So I don't know about that one. I was definitely, just to be quite honest, have to think about that some more. You know, we roll out resources from the district that, you know, teachers can use, or sometimes they supplement or tweak it a little bit to make it their own. I think if we did that, we may, you know, had standardized videos that could potentially be, some teachers would view that as infringing upon their work in the classroom.
I guess I'm talking about having standardized videos available for those that are not so technology savvy but are comfortable talking to the kids. But as far as arranging it, you know, the drawing it on a smart board or any of that stuff, that they don't know about. So
I think that also would come in with, you know, your collaborative groups, right? So like if I'm sitting with my algebra teachers, and that might be a school by school deal, you know, depending on how close you are with your collaborative groups and how well you work together. You know, certain people might rely on others to do the technology side of things to help. But I think I agree with Michelle there, and nailing it down, there's gonna be some people that would want that. There's gonna be some people that would be offended by that, because you're taking away their autonomy. Even if that's not the intention is to help.
I guess I'm thinking of it as a resource, not a mandatory, but a resource.
I agree with Michelle on the resource piece. Like we're doing the curriculum for Black History. I think it could be a resource. Maybe we can have some people record for resources for those teachers who may be struggling.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be a plus for us too in Schoology. There's additional mechanisms and this part I just know enough to be dangerous about, but it's my understanding that there's mechanisms for teachers to share resources within Schoology. So if it was all the Algebra 1 teachers in the district and almost like a group chat, if you will, and they want to share things. So I think there's potential for great collaboration beyond just what the district, curriculum team shares from time to time. So I see a comment in the chat from Roderick about if teachers are working on campus because it's distance learning, but then a student in campus learning might be acting up. Yeah, that's not going to be a place to take that child because those teachers are working on their own work. So yeah, that's good point, Roderick. I could see where that might come up in some settings, but that's going to need to be an area where teachers, they're teaching. They're just doing it remotely.
Well, and that's going to be it. That's going to need to probably be addressed, where they're not subs either. They're doing their job. Just because they don't physically have students in their room, they still have students that they are serving throughout the day in an e-school manner. And so just because you see an adult alone in the room doesn't mean that we get to pull them in a million directions.
Yep. I think, Tina, do you have your hand up again?
No, I didn't have it up.
Oh, okay. Must be from earlier. Sorry.
Yep.
I think Beth had her hand up.
Yeah, I did. I was just going to mention when we were talking about the standardized videos and that type of thing, when we were in the spring distance learning, we created a whole bunch of resources. We allowed teachers to share what they wanted to share and take what they wanted to take. In our areas, and I would imagine all electives, having one kind of standardized thing won't work because content is so different, the kids are so different. But the resource part is, I think, one of the good things that is coming out of the technological part of this type of learning is being able to share a little bit easier what we're doing. And if I can also add, I think the very best thing that came out of this is that our teachers are meeting together on a regular basis, albeit virtually, but they're talking about concerns, they're sharing their frustrations. That was a huge win for us, which was something that my teachers wanted to do. If we get back to, what did you call it, Jason?
Campus learning.
What is it?
Campus learning.
Campus learning, yes, because that was such a good way for us to stay sane. So anyway, I just wanted to touch that. Just don't forget about the electives, that every class is different. So thanks.
Oh, and I'm not an elective teacher, but I guess I'm thinking, what if there's a day where I'm sick? What if there's a day where my internet, it's not cooperating? What if there's a day, if there was a resource where I could pull a division lesson out or something like that and have it up? That would be really handy, if just life wasn't cooperating.
Yeah, I hear you, Christy, and I think that's going to be things we're all going to learn and grow through, and I think there's even a way in Schoology to push out an alert. So let's say it's a last minute illness and you weren't planning for a sub. You might could alert your students quickly to, hey, do this, I'll have, I don't know, we are going to have to figure that out together. Definitely tied to working conditions, definitely tied to, the availability of substitutes, and how that's going to look in a virtual setting. So, all right, Roderick, you have your hand up.
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I was kind of going back and forth earlier when we were talking about just the electives, and I'm at a large school. And would it be an idea for if we have a music teacher? Because I was thinking, well, if half of the students are doing campus learning and the other half are doing e-learning, how will that music teacher or art teacher, well, then they have to do double duty. So on campus, we're even trying to think of a way, how can we make sure that all of our students, are not congregated in one location? I know there's still areas to work out with that. However, would that PE coach or the music coach, would they be able to do something digital where that way the students on campus and off campus, they can participate? Because I know majority of their grades come from really participation. So then those on campus, they can just kind of perform their act either in front of that teacher, and those off campus can even send something into that teacher where that teacher is not having to do double the work as far as teach multiple classes, but just push out that same video lesson to multiple classes on that grade level. I don't know how it works on the middle school and high school level, but on the elementary end, that is kind of an idea that I was having.
Can I speak to that real quick?
Certainly.
Mr. Roderick, one of the great things that we have in for elementary and art and music is that we do have online platforms for those kids. And if we are in the e-learning and in the campus learning, you know, we're making an assumption it's not just e-learning at this point in time. I think there's going to be some great ways to work with teachers that maybe have to stay home for various reasons to help manage the e-learning. So there's some really good ways to deal with that in art and music. And we have great already online platforms for them. But I did want to make sure that to make it clear, we do standards-based grading. It is not just participation. It is 100% standards-based grading. So yeah, I just wanted to toss that out. Yeah, and we're also thinking on our end what that scheduling piece looks like, et cetera, especially because you have a large school.
Right, and yeah, my point was just to make sure that those teachers weren't doing the double work, because I know we came in earlier and said that we want to make sure that, you know, the classroom teachers aren't having to do double the work. So I know they are doing standards-based. I just want to make sure that my elective teachers, you know, and I know everyone has a great plan, but I'll just make sure that they aren't doing double work as well for the on-campus and distance learning as well. Thank you, though.
Yeah, 100% agree with you on that. And I think that there's, you know, that double duty thing. And Stephanie, she's shaking her head. 100%, we don't want those teachers. They are regular teachers too. And they need to be treated that way. So yes, we're going to make sure that they don't do that double duty type of thing. Thanks for reminding us.
Awesome. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that.
Yep. All very good comments, feedback, and definitely things that we have to wrap our heads around. And that kind of goes into one other piece, that some of our special classes, even some of our academies with CTE, have certain requirements that, you know, currently have to be done face to face. And so there is a little caveat that we're going to have to work around too. And the last that I heard this morning on a different call was that we really haven't been given a lot of flexibility with IB or Cambridge with some of those special programs for high school students that are a little more academically rigorous. And so if those programs or those industry certification areas do not provide the flexibility, then we may have particular courses that students will have to work through with their individual schools, that perhaps that particular course may have to be the one that's taken face to face. So we're going to have a lot of those different nuances to work through, and some of them are going to be very specific. But so just with Roderick's comment about just the electives and special area teachers in elementary, it just made me think of that too, to mention, because I know we had talked some last week that was something I was checking into, and we're still waiting on some additional guidance. But the most current that we've heard is that there haven't been any changes made in that realm. So I think I just wanted to, I'm looking at the registration questions that Christy had drafted and dropped in the SharePoint. And so these are helpful. Thank you, Christy. Been working with Mr. Davis about some things that he needs to capture on the bus. So we're all, you know, if you think of things like this, I definitely appreciate them. And I do read them and look at them. And so we're working on that piece as well. That's something that'll have to come out as soon as we are, a little more solid with our plan so that we can have our families register for what choices they need to make.
So on next Wednesday, the 8th, when we all come back together in the main group, is the operational protocol side going to be talking about a staff type of registration? I know we were just mainly looking at the realm of student registration and family registration.
Mm-hmm.
But do you know if the operational side, because I watched their video, but I didn't really hear a lot of that. And then when I had spoken with Tedra last week, she had said that they were thinking along those lines, but are they going to be the ones creating that survey for staff, or do we need to work on that?
To be honest, Stephanie, I don't want to answer that question because I don't really know. Like I know there was talk of it, but I don't know who was creating it. So you probably have to ask Tedra on that one.
Right.
I know that I'm working on the student one,
Okay.
along with there's some technology questions on there that we talked about earlier on the call with Dr. Berrios. Rob's got his piece about transportation. So my lens on that was from the student angle.
Okay. And are we going to try to meet again before Wednesday?
Well, that was going to be my next question. If we need to meet again, we certainly can. And just thinking about what do we want to hone in on if we meet again before the 8th?
I feel like the expectations are the part that we need to clarify most to make the parents make an informed choice.
Okay.
So maybe on Monday morning, we can get together, because I know people are with their families for the 4th of July holiday. But maybe Monday, we can come back together and look at that one pager.
Okay.
And start to look at and type up. And you probably have already started this on your side, and I know we have some ideas as well, but really fleshing out, like, well, if you click the link, what is your detailed oh gosh, the word escaped.
The FAQ or the
like the detailed option. So like if I'm choosing eSchool, the details on that. If I'm choosing campus learning, what are the details on that? And same with Poke Virtual. So I think if we can have that fleshed out on Monday, that way we can show the main group 3 really thought out plans. And we might even need to get with Dr. Jackson to see if there are thresholds that Polk is going to be working on for low, medium, and substantial threat, if we need to close a school or the district down. So what are those percentages? What are those thresholds for cases? Because that's going to be, I think, a very important thing for parents and families and teachers to know, and other staff, as they're choosing which option is best for them and their family.
Yeah, and I know, so she's a member of the group that Tedra's on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see John. Oh, John's got his hand
Correct.
up. You had John, sorry. I didn't see the hand until you came up.
So, great discussion today. Lots of great information. Love the specificity. Thank you, everybody, for your hard work. So I had the opportunity to sit in on the session today with Tedra, and Dr. Jackson was there. We're going to meet again Monday. And so I'll make a note of a couple of the things that we can cross over, and specifically about the threshold question. So I'll make sure to either pass that on to Tedra. I believe we I think the majority of us chose 9 or 9:15. It'll be right in that 9-ish range.
So then, do you think we can meet at 11 so that you can also get some information from that group and share it with us?
That's up to your team. Yeah, that's up to your team. I'll leave that up to y'all, but we certainly can try to get it.
Okay.
I think we just have to be careful that, like, the focus of our different work groups. Like we're supposed to be focused on instruction.
Right.
And they're focused on those health and safety pieces. And so I
Right.
think our precedence has to come in getting the more detailed pieces about the expectations.
Right.
And in all honesty, the Polk Virtual piece, they've been working on updating the Polk Virtual website to capture all that. And we're going to point people there because that's a whole separate kind of entity that has to follow the Florida Virtual franchise. So we really don't have a whole lot of wiggle room with that piece. So really fleshing out the FAQs for the first and second column. And then much of the first column is going to come from the health and safety people. So if we have some things before then that we can start, putting into a FAQ, I know Mr. Davis is working on his piece for transportation, which will definitely go in that one. But we can certainly meet Monday just to talk about that. I think if we get that middle FAQ really solid, that's like the work for our instructional team. And then, so we can do that. So do we want, so Monday at 11, is that?
I'm okay. I'm good with Monday at 11. And that will give John an opportunity to hop on if he can. If they're
Okay.
meeting at 9, he can hop on ours if he can.
All righty. Well, we'll do that then Monday at 11 with the goal of reviewing the one pager again with some of the feedback before we have our larger group on Wednesday, and then really working through that FAQ in a little more detail. But sounds like a plan.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thanks again to everyone. We wish everybody a safe 4th of July.
Mm-hmm.
Keep social distancing and keep staying healthy.
That's right.
All right. Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Bye.